Welcome, everybody, to Breakthrough Souls. On today's show, I have a panel of two guests. Alex Kane is a yoga instructor, movement specialist, shibari artist, and herbalist originally from the San Francisco Bay Area. Alex is currently located in Chico, California. In their spare time, Alex has a passion for contemplating the deeper meaning of reality while staying grounded, catering to the eternal demands of two house cats. Welcome, Alex.
Hi, thank you for having me, Bill. The cats
You
also
bet.
thank you.
And Cherry Williams has been a yoga teacher at Freebird Studio since 2021 and has been teaching movement arts for over 15 years. In her spare time, she expands her knowledge in topics including astrology, religion, magic, history, philosophy, and is currently indulging a special interest in computer sciences and AI technology. Cherry enjoys fire dancing and aerial arts and will be guiding an intro to fire event at Freebird Yoga Studio in Chico, California on April 5th. Cherry, welcome to the program.
Hi, Bill. Thanks for having me on today.
One of the reasons I wanted to have more people on, I've talked about awakening on my program before, because I had a spiritual awakening what I call a material awakening after doing a lot of research into politics and that kind of thing. And then I embarked on some plant medicine journeys and had a spiritual awakening. And that's, I think, kind of what we're focusing on here. And in talking with you offline, it sounds like you've also had a spiritual awakening, both of you, or we'll just call it awakening for now, and I'll let you define the awakening process. But what I see is there's a lot of people, it seems like, also waking up right now. And then also maybe if you could define what awakening means to you. And so I'm just curious if you see the same thing happening in out there in the wild, as well as, like, what does it mean to you? Alex, I'll throw it over to you first.
Ooh, that's a really big question. I think that awakening is a process, and it's a lifelong process. It's not like we hit a certain point and suddenly we are awake. We're continuously unraveling layers of ourself to get back to what, as much as awakening is a sense of growth, it is also a sense of remembering past all of the social conditioning and past all of the bullshit associated with society and societal expectations, whatever those might be, whether they're familial, religious, or whatever. Just getting back to what you feel about yourself, regardless of all of these other perceptions. And then the work that can be incorporated into that sense of awakening is usually a deeply, for lack of a better word, spiritual journey that goes all over the place. And so that's what I think. I think that it is also a sense of embodiment. Like, it's not enough to be aware of something, but then you have to practice this new version or information or whatever. Yeah.
And so, I mean, do you also see that, like, that people are waking up now, like your people around you, or do you see something happening in the collective?
Yes and no. I think that it is a concept that we talk about a lot more than probably in the last 100 or 200 years. But it's a deeply individual process that, again, is an unraveling layers and layers and layers of yourself to get to a deeper sense of yourself and your connection with your environment and your spirituality, ultimately.
Yep, absolutely. Cherry, what about yourself? You know, do you feel like people are waking up now more than ever, and maybe what does that mean to you as well?
Yeah, I have a similar feeling or thought about it as Alex, that maybe now, like in the 2000s, we're seeing more people talk about this concept of awakening than we have in a very, very long time, especially in, the portion of the globe that we inhabit. We're seeing that as, I think we're seeing the topic of awakening come up in dual ways, where it's being used in kind of almost like a pseudo-philosophical band-aid, and then like actual awakening to the true self, which I love how Alex described as being something that is that's a continuous process. And so I think it is happening a lot right now. And I think it's happening in many ways, and some of those ways are very beneficial. Obviously, the three of us have experienced immense growth from our awakening experiences. And I think there's danger in the fact that it's become a popular topic as well.
Interesting. In what way?
Well, we have this idea of awakening as connecting to your true self and becoming sovereign is a word that's used a lot. And even the word sovereign has, roots to it that here in the West, I think we should be disentangling ourselves from. And so this idea that to be awakened is to be self-sovereign and fully in charge of one's emotional, mental life state. I don't think that is what awakening is necessarily. And so the kind of whitewashing of the topic of awakening becomes a mechanism for avoidance of actual topics, and the deeper, darker layers of self that have to be undone in order to recover the actual self.
Alex, it looks like you're agreeing. Do you have any thoughts on what Cherry was just saying?
Yeah. In Jungian psychoanalytical theory, the idea of sovereign is a pretty broad concept. It has to, it's a lot to do with integration. And a lot of the time when we view these things in ourselves, we think, oh, I will shed the negative, or I'm only going to focus on these specific parts. And that can lead to a state of self-delusion where it's like, to be sovereign is to exist with your shadow and all of the negativity that you may have or perceive or whatever. Like it goes hand in hand, and you're in a state of acceptance with that so that you can better direct your life. But I do agree with that a lot, just in sense of, like colonialist language really always having been in vogue for hundreds of years now in this part of the world, and our ideas of that when it comes to these different spheres.
Interesting. Yeah, like for me, probably a different generation, the word I think sovereign might mean something different to me. Because I'd thought about that as, it's like part of it is I think what's happening in society. Sometimes I think it's a kind of this heavy over, like somebody's over me, like looking at my data, for example, or taking my data, or trying to get me to do something. And I had this concept when I had my awakening experience. That was with plant medicines a couple of years ago. And one thing I was calling in is freedom, like this concept of I want to feel free. I don't want to feel. I want to feel connected too. And I think there's a dance between the idea of maybe sovereignty and freedom, but there is a heavy connection between the human. I call it the human organism. I think we're an organism that is designed to operate collectively together. So I guess I find it really interesting to hear what your take is on some of the words that we use and some of the jargon that we use when we talk about awakening, and like you mentioned, Cherry and Alex, sovereignty. So I think that's fascinating. Actually, even though we had talked beforehand, I didn't realize that there's so much nuance to words. So I think it's good that we all kind of get it out there. In terms of like when I talk about, I had this like desire to be like to have this freedom where I feel like when I was like, even in society, it's like I have to get a job, I need health care, and I feel like I get stuck into a corner. And I feel like everywhere I turn, it's somebody's like trying to pin me down. How did like freedom and sovereignty and all that? I mean, does freedom resonate with you the way I'm explaining it? I'm just kind of curious. Maybe I'll throw it over to Cherry, and versus like you were talking about sovereignty, which may be connected to colonialism. That's interesting because who wants colonialism anymore? That's ridiculous. But yeah, Cherry.
Yeah. I think the idea of freedom is really fascinating. And I say that because I don't exactly believe in free will. And so the idea of freedom or free will get a little amorphous. But I think that what you're talking about, the kind of freedom you're talking about, is the ability to think and then act outside of the bondage of a lot of what we could call modern day structures. And so being born in the West under the banner of colonialism in the environment that we've been raised in, that environment itself has placed bondage on all people in that environment of different kinds. You know, even the I almost said so-called, but even the like 1%, even billionaires, they have bondage in this system as well. I don't think that justifies their behavior in any way, but they are also bound within the system. They're not free either. And so I think that what we're getting at is this idea that freedom from the systems that we're born into is the ability, right now anyways, it's the ability to think and then act in our own lives in ways that are true reflections of our own desire bodies, which is a part of our true self, and not reflections of the systems that we were born into.
Yeah, I mean, I think the systems we're born into, I mean, it's such a good point as I, do my research and, learn more about, say, feudalism, for example, which kind of morphed into capitalism, so to speak, or slavery, really. Like, I mean, I think the progression is feudalism, slavery, and then we have capitalism, which to me, in its worst form, is a master-slave kind of, kind of a master-slave thing. But it's so much more disguised that people don't realize they're swimming in an authoritarian. Because when you go into work, most work is that you have somebody you have to obey, otherwise you get fired.
You get punished.
Which, right, and also we're again healthcare in the America. You're tied to your healthcare system, your healthcare. So if you then quit, then you're kind of on your own. So there's these subtle ways, I think, that that we have that and breaking out of it, which makes me think of having I think we need to go towards a more flattened society or maybe local communal society. I don't know, Alex, if that resonates with you, kind of as the conversation flows here.
What you were talking about, the bonds of money. Like, money is a form of magic, and capitalism is a system of magic. We all agree, I'm pretending to have a piece of paper that's money. We all agree that this has meaning. We all agree that is something that controls our lives. It's not fucking real. It represents something that might be real, right? Like our nation's investment in gold or other precious metals or whatever. But essentially, the way that we are enslaved currently is very magical to me, where you sign your name on a contract and now you've lost your rights to like a given group of people or whatever it might be. And the way that money has to be everything is monetized, even and no offense to anyone who does do this, but even with like spirituality, like nowadays it's common to monetize your spirituality. Whereas like I don't believe that money has any place in ceremonial spaces or in that sort of work. And so, yeah, I believe that it would be, in Europe, they have like local grocers. They have it so you can just walk down the block and get what you need for the day or the week. Like you're involved with your sense of community. And here we have literal food deserts and everything is so spread out. And our entire situation is dependent on automobiles and being able to drive to where we need to go. And yeah, it would be better if things were much more
I
direct
love that word.
What's that?
Flat, the way Bill said.
Yeah.
A little more flat.
Actually. Yeah. Truly.
Yeah, good. I mean, the fact that you two have thought about this so much at your age, which I roughly know that I'm much older than you, but
I'm between the ages of 25 and 50.
It
I'm
took
actually
me
97, so
97. So there you go. And I'm 238. So yeah, so it warms my heart that you've thought about this. When I was younger, I just woke up. I was born And then I woke up, and then I just knew something was wrong. I knew something was wrong, and I didn't know what it was. But we were just growing up in Silicon Valley then. I was like, okay, I don't know, but something didn't seem right, right? But I think it's more apparent to both of you, and the level of thought that you've given it. But which I wanted to ask this question, and it's kind of maybe I should have asked it earlier. But what was like your awakening experience? What woke you up to? And I know it gradually happens over time, like me. But there was a moment where it was like as a little bit more into it, like as more like yeah. Um, I'm more vocal about it all of a sudden, or it's more apparent, or the whole thing seems more like a matrix. And did you have a moment? I'll throw it back to Alex again. Did you have a moment where you woke up, or was it a kind of a lifelong thing for you?
Um, there have been a lot. I'm gay and I'm non-binary. I prefer the word androgynous, but only recently has non-binary entered the cultural vocabulary more significantly. But those aspects already set me apart from a lot of society back in the 90s, let's say. And just what I have done in order to better understand myself and what I have studied and all of that, like, has given me a certain break from the rest of culture already, where it's a lot of my trials and errors in like my personal life were entirely based on failure, as it is for most gay people, since for most of us you don't have the supportive home environment of being able to talk to somebody about your feelings, or like, how do I attract this person, or just normal shit that you might do if you were if you were heterosexual. um and so that failure was a bit of an awakening. And then also just my years of rampant drug abuse and being on the other side of this society where you're just waking up in constant agony and suffering and literally hell. And like the depths and the levels you go in pursuit of that hunger and the lifestyles that people actively live, it's a labyrinth. And it's happening all the time, all around us. And the regular version of society, we go out, we go to work, and we see our nice shops and we have our nice roads. But there's this whole other layer to everything that it's not only cultural, but it's individual. There's that darkness inside of all of us in some way or another. Whether or not we fully realize or express that is another thing. But yeah, I would say a lot of those developed my sense of awakening and ultimately my sense of ethics as I grew older and actually developed a sense of empathy once I got off the drugs.
Yeah, that'll do it.
That'll
Cherry,
do it,
what
yeah.
about you? Cherry, what about you? I mean, what was? Did you have an awakening experience?
Yeah, it was cumulative. And in hindsight, like when I look back, I can see like what I would call little awakenings. And there, you kind of hinted at them already. We've been talking about the structures that we're born into. And so I think as those structures became apparent to me, each one of those was a little awakening. And then for myself, uh, I worked incredibly like a manic person through my 20s, and I experienced a catastrophic burnout at the same time as I experienced a very traumatic external event. And the result of those two things together was that my mind was wiped out for about a year. And when I woke up from that emptiness, I realized that I was not a changed person from who I had been, but I was literally a different person. And the past couple of years have been about kind of unraveling and understanding what that means. And that event that happened in 2019, and then in 2021 is when I had this realization about myself that was inhabiting this body. And then from 2021 until now has been just an unfolding of that process. And that has been what I call my large awakening. And it has been like an integration of all the small awakenings. I've also had, psychedelic experiences that have informed who I am today and how I think. And those were, I would call those even small awakenings, even though they were very intense at the time. And yeah, I think that for me in that story, you know, what I learned about myself was that I think I developed a construct identity to protect my true identity in childhood, and that as that identity had been dissolved, then my true self was given space to emerge. And thankfully, I am safe enough in my environment and my, you know, my close relationships that I was able to awaken to myself and realize that myself, and this is where like I find my definition of awakening, is that I recognized my true self to be separate from my conditioning and separate from the actions I was taking in the world. And that where I used to think my actions defined myself, I realized that myself was defining my actions. And that was like the event of awakening. But then I think that awakening is something that never ends once it begins. You know, like Alex had said earlier, there's layers to it. And so, yes, for me, there was like a cataclysmic event that I can locate on a calendar. And there's this continual process. I don't think a cataclysmic event is exactly necessary, but it is, you know, it is helpful.
Yeah, I think, yeah, a few things come to mind for me. One is when you guys are talking, it's like, it's perspective. It's like maybe at one point we are the outsider, right? I felt like an outsider my whole life for various reasons, but it's like you're on the other side of society, right? Whereas maybe somebody, and I bet a lot of people who appear to be like stereotypical, like it looks like their lives are perfect or something. I'm sure they're not. You know, it's just the facade that we see. But I think all three of us have had experiences where we've had that perspective, and then it shifts, and then or maybe there's a struggle, and then you're on the other side of the struggle, and you just see things from the outside in. Yeah. I've always been kind of an outside in kind of observer, and yeah, that has definitely given me contrast to wake up. But then, like you said, Cherry, that, and even Alex, I think, that it happens in layers. I mean, there might be a big event where you're like, oh, I'm awake, but it never ends because, I mean, what is awakening? It's like we're trying to understand who we are and why we're here. And we probably won't know that, in my opinion, until after we die. And maybe even then, there's probably a lot to, you know, like, I feel like if I knew too much, my circuits would fry as a human.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
When you have an intense psychedelic experience, you know, literally you're ripped out of this three-dimensional space, and you have all of these incredible experiences because your mind has been opened up because of psychedelics or however you get to that point. But when you start to come back to this reality, you only are able to hold on to a conscious fraction of the overall experience. So you could have been tripping through time and space for an eternity, but when you come back, you're only going to remember like 5 or 10% of the overall experience. Which again, like we play in conscious and unconscious ways, right? Like what you were saying earlier, we're not a single entity. It's like when we did Bill and I did the IFS training, was it? Internal Family Systems?
Yeah, Internal Family Systems. Yep.
Wow, what a trip. Again, taking the idea of, instead of being a singular version, we're masks of ourselves on setting, circumstance, people were around, all of that. And then, yeah, that's just a good therapy tool, to be completely honest. I use it all the time at home, and it's improved my arguments.
I've been using it for meditation. Like when I'm trying to like quiet my mind, I have the internal caricature of an emotion. I have them step out and go play on a swing or ride a bike.
Yeah.
You know, like, no, you, like
That's
the person who wants to write a
powerful.
to-do list. I'm like, no, you to-do list little person, you can go swing on a swing while I'm trying to meditate. You were cutting out there a little bit, Alex.
Oh, sorry.
But you guys both were talking about also integration. I believe, if I can just sum it up, that, you know, our work is never done when we awaken, and when we maybe we have moments where we have a little bit of movement forward, where we wake up and you're like, everything looks like a matrix or something. And then we need to integrate. It's like we're not awake. We never awaken fully. And then when we awaken, it can be scary. Right? That's the whole
Terrifying.
point of my
Mm.
podcast, is that, if we wake up, it can be scary and you're not alone. I want to tell people you're not alone when you wake up and you start realizing it feels like we're in a matrix. Something's going on. I feel like something doesn't feel right, and it doesn't feel like we're living the way we're supposed to be living as humans. But integration. So just, when we do have these awakenings, what is, and I'm going to get into this a little bit more later, but since you touched on it, I wanted to bring it up. And I think integration is really important. Cherry, do you want to talk about integration for you? Like, what do you do when you need to integrate or even modulate? You know what I mean? Just try to not go crazy or something from
Yeah.
reality.
So I think for me, when I think of integration, I think of my ability to relate what I have learned from a specific thing or trigger, to relate that thing that I've learned to not only my current time space, but also my memory time space. And so when I, as I do my inner, oops, sorry, I just slammed my hand on my microphone. When I do my inner child work, or shadow work, or whatever language you are using for it, and I find something that needs attention, and I have an understanding about it. Usually, it is a form of compassion for myself, and in that present time space. So, for example, my dear friend Emily is moving away soon, and it hurts my heart to know that I won't have the closeness of space that we used to have. And as I allowed myself to feel sadness for her, or for that, not for her, but for the separation of space, that allowing of sadness, that is integration of a thing that I've learned through my awakening, which is that this is my own personal awakening, right? Part of mine, but I'm generally very optimistic, and I have a strong gratitude practice, and those things are amazing. And I have also used them to dissociate from emotions like sadness. And so in this current time space of allowing myself to feel sad, really feel sad and cry, and not distract myself with all of the positive things I could say in that time space to myself. She's not dying. She's just moving. She's moving for amazing reasons. She has a beautiful support system that's going to catch her as she relocates. There's all this beauty in this moment, and I'm still allowed to feel sad. And as I integrate that into my present moment, I realize all the times in my past that I did not allow myself to feel sad for the movement of people in my life. And all the times where the movement of people in my life was actually very sad, and not born of joy and success, but born of pain and trauma. And so in the current time space moment, as I'm crying for the space that I'm going to have between me and my friend Emily, I realize that I'm also experiencing these locked up emotions. And so the integration comes when I allow myself to feel all, all of what I had packed up inside. And it's like a little thread, right? And at the beginning of the thread are childhood event. And at this current time space moment is my friend Emily moving away. And as I let myself feel sad here, and I integrate, I feel sad here, and then I integrate, and I feel sad here, and I keep going until I've reached as far back as my memory will allow me to integrate this idea that I'm allowed to feel sad for these leavings, these changings of people, of time and space across my entire existence. So it's kind of a long definition, but that's integration to me.
No, I love that because as you were saying that too, and I think we probably all do this to some degree or another, where it's like, something happens, like somebody leaves, and you're sad, and you're just like, no, it's great. You just put a stiff upper lip, as the British would say in the old days, I think, right? And then, but when you're saying it, when you're describing it, I'm thinking how much you are honoring your relationship with that person, with that human.
Yeah.
It's like, and how much it meant to you.
Hmm.
And to me, it almost sounds like it's a special time to be grateful. It's also, it's sadness, but it's gratitude, like profound gratitude.
Yes.
And you probably wouldn't give that up for anything, even for the sadness that it brought, because the sadness maybe brought you to a realization. But yeah, I was really feeling it when
Yeah.
you were talking about that, and the importance of letting ourselves feel everything.
Mhm.
Alex, what about yourself, in terms of when you have an awakening or something, an epiphany that maybe rocks your world? Because I know we have talked about plant medicines as well as psychedelics. I'm sure you've had some moments where you've had a big leap in consciousness. How do you integrate that? Because it's not like you have a knowing and then boom, everything's fine. You got to go, what do I do with this, and how do I process it? How do you do
Mm.
that?
Um, that is so much of a such a large topic. I'm gonna try to. So let me think. Uh, my biggest integration period was probably during my alcohol recovery, and actually going through a period of time of sobriety for the first time in my life, and that was way later. I was like over 30 at that point, and fortunately, at that time, I had developed a very deep somatic practice that contributed to my overall recovery. But the integration part of all of these aspects and all these beings, and having to learn who I am for really the first time without these crutches, where it's like
Mhm.
plants and medicine can be enormously beneficial. I still use them all the time to balance myself or whatever I need to do to not be an insane person. But there's also a deep level of holding yourself brutally accountable, or
Mhm.
being brutally honest. A lot of the time we think of recovery and we think of just, again, like the cookie cutter, you'll be positive, you'll be light, you'll only be happy. And that's bullshit. It's like I say in my classes, we have these bodies, these nerves, all the pleasure and all the pain. It's all for us. It's a
Mhm.
symphony of sensation to experience. And it's important to allow yourself to feel that. I felt like embracing the concept of pain as a holistic tool, not injury, because there is a difference. We talked about this before, but the idea of pain, rather than immediately running away from that, whether it be physical or mental, maybe stay there for a few seconds and explore that sensation. And can you do it for a few minutes? So that was a huge part of my integration process, was just really getting into a daily somatic practice, and then how I can use that to inspire my movements afterwards.
Mhm.
Um, and then that's all I can remember. What was the second part of your
No,
question?
that's actually, this might dovetail nicely into this is a little bit related,
Hmm.
and kind of what you're talking about. You guys are both yogis. You're yoga instructors. Um, And I know that I hear this concept called the subtle body
Mhm.
Hmm.
all the time. And so I'm just going to read the definition that AI generated for me on the internet. Right?
Was it Nova?
Cherry's like, yeah, okay. Well, let's see if you guys agree with it, because you're the experts. But it says the subtle body in yoga refers to a layer of being that exists beyond the physical body, encompassing energy, intuition, and consciousness. It is connected to the chakra system and is considered essential for spiritual awareness and personal growth. So, yeah, I mean, to me, after I had my spiritual awakening, and I went into the yoga studio, Freebird Yoga Studio, your yoga studio, for the first time about a year and a half ago. I'm like, this is what my mind, body, and soul needs right now
Mhm.
after this. Like, it was also really huge part of my integration was just receiving what you all were providing as teachers.
Mhm.
So as what is what is subtle body to you? And I know it might be like, what, subtle body? I don't get it. What is that to you, Cherry? And how is yoga helped you with integration?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Because yoga at Freebird was what helped me to recover my mind after the events of 2019. And in in yoga philosophy, we talk about this idea of unification, right? Yoga means to unite, and to unite all different levels of things, of your mind and body, of breath and heart, of heart and mind, of self and body, self and heart, self and mind, self and other, self and all. you know, sorry, I got very excited about that, and I forgot what your original question was.
Oh, it was just talking about the subtle body,
Okay.
really, and like kind of how that's helped.
Yeah,
I mean,
thank
it's
you
just
for
helped
the
me so much.
redirect. So in that yoga practice, I would agree actually with your AI's definition of subtle body, that it is the way that energy moves in us, and I think also around us. We as a human entity, we have our own electromagnetic torus field, and so that I think that space is a part of our subtle body, because it's made by, I keep touching my microphone. That field is made by our heart. It is made by the interaction of our own neurons and the flow of blood within our body. And so to think that that is a separate phenomenon from the body, I think that is a mistake. And so when I think of subtle body, I think of that definition of internal, right? My energy systems, chakras are one way to talk about it. The movement of prana or of chi, and the external energetic space around us. I think those two things combined are what I would call subtle body.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and Alex, I know, like I've been in your classes too, where you were just kind of touching on this, where we do yin, and we're really kind of tapping into focusing on. I feel like bringing our attention back to ourselves, because part of my spiritual awakening is also, I think there's a lot of people who don't love themselves,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah,
I think
it's this is
go for it.
this is huge. This is probably the biggest thing that, and you can really see this as an aspect of our social conditioning here in the West, is how disenfranchised we are from ourselves and from our intuition, from our security. I mean, you say the words energy or use the word spirituality, immediately that has a triggering effect because we relate that to a religious dogma or crazy cult stuff. And then
Mhm.
when you start looking, okay, well, what is energy? What is like the energetic body? And it's like, oh, wow, there's actually a ton of scientific research on this that then relates into various philosophies that have been around for thousands of years. And so I think that's part of awakening. And for lack of a better word, I do think that's part of spirituality. Like practicing kindness, like allowing yourself, like you, Cherry, allowing yourself to feel and to cry, like for all of it. And like
Mhm.
when you have those moments of realization, it's like, oh, this is something I've seen over the course of my life. And like now you understand, or just something clicks, or you receive information that completes a puzzle or whatever. Like
Yeah.
these things are really powerful. When you start awakening, then you wake up to your own intuition and your own security. When you're secure in yourself, other people's versions of reality will not offend you.
Yes.
Hopefully.
I love that. Is so well said. Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I kind of wanted to ping off of that, which is in the definition of subtle body. They talk about intuition. Kind of wanted to get your opinions on intuition. When after I did plant medicines, one of the things was I felt I felt a lot of love for myself for continuing to take care of myself and
Mhm.
not giving up on myself,
Mhm.
even though,
Yeah.
like, because we're all human and we all can make mistakes. And the first person who has to give yourself a break is you. But the other thing, so I just wanted to kind of, you know, I couldn't, I think we all couldn't state this enough. Like, take care of yourself, and for me, going into the yoga studio is a really great way to do that. But the subtle body also talks about intuition.
Mm-hmm.
After I after I did the plant medicines, especially psilocybin, my intuition was stronger. And then I needed to trust it but and I still do. I'm still working on that. But intuition's another one of our senses that I feel like has been muted.
Mm-hmm.
Cherry, do you feel the
Absolutely.
same way? And how do you use your intuition, and how do you honor it?
Yeah. I do think that intuition is dulled and suppressed by modern structures. I think it is semi-intentional. That's maybe tapping into my conspiracy theorist side. I think it's also unintentional. I think it's both. But for myself, I've experienced intuition, I think, my whole life, and prior to uh, the awakening of my current self of Cherry, when I was still the construct self, I still experienced intuition, but it was really wrapped up in projection and assumption, and then also the systems that I was engaging in. So my ability to intuit things was still bound in like the rigid structures of the careers I was in, right? And as I have become myself since this awakening after the emptying of my mind, I feel like my intuition has redeveloped and I understand it much better now. And what I feel like it is in myself is the ability to interpret the information that my body is giving me outside of my mind space, and then allowing the information that I've received from my body to influence my mind space. So instead of thinking about a thing and then trying to feel that thing in my body, I am going to connect to how my body feels and then check in with the thoughts in my head. And that unification process, through yoga, is how I think my intuition has really started to thrive. Is I've not only honored the process of listening to body over mind, but also I'm doing that like regularly, right? So it's a practice. It's a method that I feel like I've discovered, and then it's a continuation of constantly checking in with myself. I feel like my heart is the organ that processes intuition, and so I think other parts of the body can speak intuitively through like somatic sensation, and I think also that the heart is kind of like an epicenter for that somatic information, and so I try to locate that intuitive space within my heart when I am moving through my day-to-day life. Like, that's a challenge, right? I'm talking about that as like a perfected practice. I'm not that great at it yet, but trying to be aware of it. And then especially for me right now, when I make big decisions or decisions that impact not just myself, I'll try to tap into my heart space and hear what my body is telling me through my heart before I let my mind start to make up a story.
And I think, yeah, when you say tap into your heart space, what comes to my mind is like all the vibrations of variations of love.
Mm-hmm.
And I say love, and it's like words are so not like spirituality, sovereignty, love, like these words, everybody, they're coded for each individual. But
English.
yeah, it's hard. But when I say love,
Yeah.
it's like that, but it's a higher vibration. It's like, it could be compassion, it can be gratitude, it can be whatever it is, but it's like there's a purpose to it. What's the wisdom in it? I love the way you put that. Alex, what about you? Intuition, how is that something you were born with a strong intuition and you followed it your whole life? Or is it something you're like, wait a minute, my intuition is something there that I can use and develop? How do you
I
perceive this?
definitely did whatever I want, regardless of my intuition. And I feel like most people, I don't want to say most people, excuse me, that's a generalization, but I feel like a lot of people do, especially again, the social conditioning that we have, the culture that we have, the structures in the society. We are taught in a way to suppress that knowing. And it's an energetic thing. I mean, I have a few examples in mind, when people have an argument in a room and you walk into that room, you can feel the energy of that argument. That's a real thing. Um, going on to another example of intuition. This one actually involves you, Cherry. There's a very, very, very rarely encountered pose in yoga called deer pose. And I believe it was you were subbing for an evening yin class. And before that, you hadn't shown up yet. You weren't there. But, you know, Chelsea was there with a student. They were talking about something. It's like, oh, try this. And she did deer pose. I was like, wow, I never see that in real life. And then, so Chelsea bounced, Cherry came, and Cherry was there. She was like, at some point in the class, she was like, I don't know who might need this right now, but we're going to do deer pose. And it's like, what? Like, the synchronicity, you know, that's powerful. And I've seen multiple instances like that happen in that studio space, right? Because we're sharing such deep collective information in such a weird way. And then finally, this actually goes to the extremely occult school of divination, or as the Greeks called it, mancy, whatever kind of mancy you might want to interpret it as, pyromancy, necromancy, however. And I actually get this from a physicist I heard in a podcast who is a practicing occultist. And you think, how could a physicist be an occultist? It was an amazing podcast. I can't remember the name of it or the scientist, but they described it in the most universal way I've ever heard, which is that you are slowing down enough to practice a heightened state of awareness for what's happening internally, and then using your imagination to interpret those sensations. And again, just more universal language is always beneficial, because that's something that could be applicable to anybody regardless of their version of reality. But I feel like it gets deeper than that when you do tune into that. I mean, I've accepted the fact that I'm completely insane, and so a lot of my daily practice is like, by Western standards, would be, oh, this person's looking at a corner and hallucinating vividly for hours at a time. It's like, but it gives me peace and it helps me go about my life in a way where before it was so self-destructive. So yeah, again, language, culture, ideas, like all of this stuff. And like, it all feeds back into how can you better be connected to your sense of intuition? How can you trust yourself, and how can you practice that security and what you were saying, self-love? Love is the greatest magic, ultimately.
Yeah, I agree on that one. I've got a couple more questions left. And this is maybe a little bit of a pivot, but I feel like it might be, to me, I don't know, I want to talk about it. I think it's important. But do you believe, it could be a simple question, it could be not a simple question, do you believe our consciousness continues after we die, Cherry?
I do. I do believe that our consciousness continues after we die. I also believe in ghosts. So I think that both the intelligence that is connected to all things, that lives inside all things, I think that goes back into an all state. And that the personality that we cultivate inside these bodies in companionship with the greater intelligence, I think that personality has the potential to remain in the material as a ghost. I don't think that always happens. I think that's a conditional effect for positive and so-called negative reasons. So-called negative. I think things like murders make ghosts, but I also think things like mothers make ghosts. So I do think that consciousness continues. I don't think that ghosts are alive in the way that a fleshy person is alive. Obviously, they don't have a fleshy body, but I think that growth that we experience as people in bodies is a combination of intelligence, body, and personality, which personality is a combination of intelligence and body and experience. And so I think a ghost is the remnant of a personality that will stick around for a variety of reasons, or could be potentially called upon by living people. But not that ghost continues to grow or evolve in themselves.
So I think what you're saying is consciousness and that remnant they kind of separate, and one might dissipate and the other one continues. Is that what I'm hearing you
Yeah,
say?
and I think that both of those things, like the ultimate consciousness, intelligence, the word we might use for it, and the ghost, they're both in my body right now. So when this body dies, both of those things will be released.
Yeah, that makes
You
sense.
know,
It's like the patterns the energetic patterns that we have that just kind of like they're still there. They're kind of still doing their energetic thing
yeah.
unconsciously, perhaps. That's super interesting. Alex, what about you? Do you believe your consciousness continues after your body is done?
Yeah, I have like everything. I'm of several minds about it. I guess so. This goes into like we don't have a lot of language for this in the West, so I'll just use it the way that like Western mindsets have to define everything and have some measurable outcome.
Mm.
Is that so this won't be my end all answer, but this is just to begin with, is that death is just transformation.
Mm.
Death on all levels is transformation. Whether it's a personal death or a literal death, like death is happening all the time, all around us. It goes hands in hand with life. We don't breathe without killing things. Like we are a constant state of rot and decay and growth and experience. And the same thing with our environment constantly. There really isn't any difference when you boil it down. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
And then looking at things in terms of like quantum mechanics, then what even is time? You know, time to me is just this giant woven tapestry of everything, past, present, and future happening simultaneously. But then you also get variations of that. But if there's like, yeah, so if there is no time and we're not actually, we experience things linearly because we're three-dimensional beings, but if everything is happening simultaneously, I feel like our brains can't quite handle that, but we pick up on it, and that's where we get like these shades and these aspects and like these remnants of like really powerful experiences, like in Greek magic and necromancy. If you're trying to course an undead spirit, it usually has to be one that died too young or violently. Restless dead, that was a huge concept they had back then, was that you had your dead that are in peace and they're fine, or the ones that died a violent death or too young or whatever. Those are the restless dead. Those are the ones that people would usually call upon and work with. um, and I feel like we still get remnants of that now, even again like what you were saying with like the idea of a personal death, like incorporating a personal death or like a remnant or a shade into like a spiritual practice can be an incredible experience, not the least of which is psychological.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think all of this is deeply connected and like relevant. I also want to honor the idea of the mysteries. In a lot of ancient philosophies, they would break up these different concepts. Like in Greek and Egyptian magic and religion, it was broken up into theurgy, magic, and the mysteries. And the mysteries are these unknown aspects of reality that are just always happening. I feel like that's part of what makes life like, maybe that's what keeps us from going completely insane.
Not knowing is probably what keeps us from going insane. So, like, if we know too much, that's when people go crazy.
Yeah,
I think maybe
classic literary device. But yeah, I
totally.
do, like, again, like it goes into so many different schools of thoughts and ideas and like the energy body and like the ancient Egyptians, when you died, the idea of mummification wasn't just mummifying a body, it was also combining the etheric and the astral self, the ba and the ka, into a physical vessel that then would have to be fed prayers the entire time. Because if you don't feed them prayers, they'll come back as a vampiric entity to usually feed on the family, since that was the ones they had the closest bonds with in life. And yeah, and so then it's interesting to see that concept from thousands of years ago, and then you see the same concept for like European vampirism before,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Dracula. Not to, sorry, I've gone on a tangent. Thank you.
You never
It's
know.
almost
You
like
never know. I mean, there's
it's almost like humans throughout time and location have had this idea that the untended dead are problematic.
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
They
it's a
say
good
you
point.
die two deaths, your physical death and the last time anyone ever remembers you.
Yeah.
And in working with these things, you find that like a lot of the time they just want to be talked to, you know, they want a little bit of attention. They want energy. I mean, there's specific rules in the standard Book of the Dead that's available for us nowadays, where like, oh, you can't be, obviously for cleanliness reasons, you can't be eating piss and shit, but also like these are energetic remnants of yourself you have to be careful of, because energy vampires will be seeking them out or whatever, So
That is interesting. Maybe that's a topic for another day to
yeah,
dive
maybe
into
cut
that.
that crazy part out. Never mind.
But no, I agree with you that, and I just had this thought the other day that there is really no death. I mean, sure that, it seems dramatic that when our bodies die, that's dramatic because, like you were saying, Cherry, earlier too, it's like there'll be people left behind, and we're going to miss this sharing space with other people while we're here. Um, but yeah, and then at the same time, maybe all things exist at the same time, but you really feel it when we're in the 3D. I call it like being on the earth
Yeah.
plane, and you have connections that, feel good, and then they're gone. It's hard, but at the same time, I do believe that that our consciousness continues, and we expand, and I think that's one thing we're talking about when we're awakening is expansion. So I want to pivot. Two more questions for you both. Cherry, I'll throw it over to you. Where do you think or hope we're going as a human collective as we awaken and expand our consciousness?
Um, I really like that question. And I think that I hope that people ask more questions of themselves to themselves and that they listen to the answers. I think that the age that we live in demands that we ask questions, and I use the word demand because I think that there is a very stiff consequence for not asking questions, and I think that consequence is stagnation. And in stagnant water, disease is bred, and we are made of, so I keep doing that. We are made of water. And so if stagnation breeds disease in water, then what does it do in us, in our bodies that are made of mostly water? So that's a long answer. In short, I hope that people ask more questions to themselves about themselves and that they listen to the answers.
Yeah, no, I think also what comes to mind when you're talking about, um, just like being able to ask questions and stagnated energy. I think one of the things that I'm doing as I awaken is to, and we were talking about emotions earlier, like letting emotions process through you. It's important to let it flow through. Otherwise, there's stagnation.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking of almost mental slavery.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like you're becoming a slave to stagnation and thoughts because we're afraid to say something. And there's a lot of pressure in society to conform. And so yeah, right. And like just being able to express ourselves is important.
Yeah.
Alex, what about you? Where do you hope or think we're going as a collective as we awaken?
I think that the practices we have engaged in the past are a really, really easy way to get into these states. So I'm hoping that they become more in vogue. And ultimately, I hope that people can just use their own information and their own ability to gather information, as well as their own practice and experience to facilitate their own knowing. Um, and yeah, I mean, we have bodies, like we're here, like this is all a costume. Be whatever you want to be. Like honestly, you can be whatever you want to be. There isn't an end all. It isn't an ABC checklist of like, oh, I have a job, so now I must have a wife, so now I must have a kid, so now I must have a house. Like, and that might work for some people, and that's fine, but like we're not linear beings and our interactions aren't linear. And yeah, just getting deeper into that sense of self and practicing security, when you find yourself being feeling like insecure or whatever, maybe like reflect on like what is it inside of me that feels that way. That's been the most pivotal thing for myself anyway.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, and you're kind of touching on this already, but the last question I had written down was, is there a nugget of wisdom? And you've shared a lot of nuggets of wisdom. Is there any one last nugget of wisdom you'd like to share with the audience as we wrap up this conversation about awakenings? Cherry.
Yeah. If I could leave one nugget, It would be to imagine that your heart, your literal heart, is the organ of consciousness, not your brain.
I love that. That's
Yeah,
really
beautiful.
good.
Yeah.
Alex, what do you have?
If I had one, it is easier said than done, but don't be afraid. If we could eliminate or at least hold space for fear without letting it control us, then you can do anything.
Yes.
If you could take care of your fear of death, then you can do whatever you want in this life. If you can take care of your fear of self or judgment or any of these things, then you will have the freedom of expression. And to me, expression is art, and art is divine. Also, I really like the opportunity. Chelsea could not be here with us. We talked a lot. Her biggest point in all of this was to slow down and meditate. I sadly did not mention that, but a lot of everything that has transpired, a lot of why my life is so good is because of that fact. You need to slow down. You need to process what's happening, and you need to meditate. Your thoughts are not you. If you're, to quote David Lynch, if your consciousness is a golf ball sized hole, no matter what you do, no matter what you see, no matter what art you intake, no matter what book you read, it will always be through that golf ball sized hole. But when you meditate, you expand that hole, you expand that consciousness. So now whatever you take in is going to be in a much greater scope and understanding.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I've done a lot of meditation lately, and it's not easy. And I say that if it's not easy, that means I need it more. So I keep doing it. But,
yes.
Yeah.
No, that's part of it. Yeah.
Part
Chase
of it.
the discomfort.
Chase the discomfort. So I want to thank you, Alex Kane, for being my guest, and Cherry Williams. Thanks for being on Breakthrough Souls today.
Thank you,
Thank
Will.
you guys
Thanks
so
for
much.
having
That
us.
was great.